Someone to unashamedly and single-mindedly advocate for Americans and Americans only.
What up, Tim? Pretty good one. With the eyes. Oh, you liked it? Yeah, I'll start talking about it just for a little bit. glad you enjoyed it. Hear me out? Testing. Yo. How's everybody doing? Welcome everybody to the stream. Guys, check underneath your Twitch chat. Any Twitch chatters? Because if you're a sub on Twitch, you might have a liberal surrender hands emote. And I'm not trying to encourage you guys to sub to the channel on YouTube, but YouTube might be one membership away from getting a version of a liberal surrender hands emote in the chat. Just check under your seats real quick. Those of you who are subbed on Twitch, if you're there. I don't know if I have any fans on Twitch these days. I think also Kick has it. Kick might have it as well. YouTube is the one that's most limited, of course. Thank you, Dat Bunder. I'll be able to do the Sporkle. I promise we'll do the Sporkle this weekend. I promise. Audio's good. You see that Georgia election case is coming? I'll give you some thoughts on that. Oh, look. Aquila with the very first liberal surrender hands. See, my fans want something, and I try to deliver. I just need one more YouTube membership, and I think I can bring a... You can't do animated, unfortunately, on YouTube. Otherwise, I would. They got to add that. But I could do like a version of this that's static. I'm glad you guys are enjoying them. And by you guys, I just mean Aquila. But yeah, that should be online in Kick. Oh, look! Kick is up. But appreciate you guys a lot. All right, let me start by getting right into the news. First of all, happy Friday. Happy Friday. Did you see DOJ are settling with Flynn for $50 million? Yeah, we'll get into corruption stuff. We'll get into the corruption. Don't you worry. Because it blows your mind. The level, it always gets worse. There's another rung of corruption left. Yo, someone made their custom liberal surrender hands in the YouTube chat. And that's the way it goes. Hola, Pisco. Hope your week has been good. Great Raging Tomato performance. Yeah, let's talk about that first. So as I came to think about it more, and I saw there was a post about this in my Reddit. We should start doing like Reddit, like reviews of what you guys are saying on my Reddit. Not that I have like a tons of posts, but for a small Reddit, sometimes there's like posts with 9 or 10 comments. I try to read them. So but there was one about the video with the debate on Sarah the Raging Tomato. So some thoughts about that before we get into the news of the day that I want to talk about. Because I have a little bit of a monologue that I have concepts of a monologue in my head regarding Epstein and Trump, because the story is just, it is so sensational. It is so beyond the pale that I just need to do like a summation of it, like a full kind of recap. Okay. So on the Raging Tomato panel, the more I think about it, like that was just such a pathetic performance by the opposition. Even from the beginning, as I think more and more about it, the like meta, I think my opponents are going to come up with word games, or like they're going to have to try to define what they mean by terms. I'm guessing we're going to have to do a lot of that. As I think about that, like posture from Ryan, it makes me just like even more sick of the smugness. Like he says, I guess my opposition is going to have to quibble about what the words mean in this proposition that I created. So he creates this proposition, this debate proposition, which is that the left has abandoned the American moral proposition. He says America is a propositional country, and the left has abandoned the American moral proposition. Okay? And the sort of comments in my video are scathing. People are like Googling this term, American moral proposition, and Google Scholar, 0 hits. This term is not a term of art. This is some shit he made up, right? The American moral proposition. The term itself. And so for a term that you made up that has no fixed meaning, no usage anywhere, for you to then start the debate saying, I predict my opponents are going to be talking a lot about definitions. Like, go fuck yourself, dude. I love Ryan. I mean, I love the debates. I'll definitely keep doing them, and I love enjoying the back and forth. But can you imagine the kind of hubris of creating your own term, this like standard that you've decided is very important, that has no scholarly or academic footprint to speak of? It's not something that's hotly debated in the academy. And then to take umbrage at the notion that this sui generis term that you just made up might be a subject of some analysis. Can you like imagine the level of hubris that requires? Like, imagine you made a term up like blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I guess my opponents are gonna be thinking about what blah, blah, blah means. My guess is they're not going to be argue that like the left doesn't know how to abandon blah, blah, blah. Like, what? Now, there's some words in there that I was kind of getting a sense of what was meant. That's why I agreed to it. Like, what's meant is that there's something that connects the country throughout time. And I'm like, because it's like abandoning a proposition that's inherent to America. And America I take to be like the country of the United States of America. So that's what like why I came into the debate thinking like this is what I take from that statement. If someone were to like talk to me about abandoning an American moral proposition, like it's very hard to think of particular political views that bind Americans across time and geography other than the Constitution and like respect of the structure of the country. Because anything you want to do that's more specific than that is going to get fucked up. So, you're the bearded guy. Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, and we'll get into that in a second. Yeah, you seem to know what was going on. I could just tell by a couple of the words you used. But I don't pretend to know like a lot of philosophy or anything. But I could see some huge circularities and confusions in some of the things that they were saying. So like, all right, but take a step back, right? So there's that like semantic thing, right, where you come in with this term. And I think I have like a sensible, like this is why I think, like I'm not going to sit here and say my definition is better than yours, but it seems like Ryan and like when I say better, I mean like normatively better, except that it seems like they're trying to get at the same thing, right? They're also trying to get some connective tissue that like stretches across time and geography in the country. So it does seem like there is a metric that we're both implicitly agreeing to in the course of that conversation. That is, we're all looking for some kind of fixture that is present in American culture, or whatever you want to say, American society, across a significant period of time. That seems to be implicit. So like, when I say better, I only mean on those terms. I don't mean like inherently better. But we'll get into why this is so, it's so fucked. First off, like heat check, or I don't know what to say, like sanity check. If you want to debate DI, just like set up a debate about DI. If you set up a debate about DI, we don't have to talk about Trump at all. You could tell they were like really didn't want to bring up Trump. But unfortunately, if you like bring up some proposition that could be interpreted to relate to things the left is doing, then things the left is doing or are doing is going to obviously be informed by what the country is going through. That's like a kind of a side point. But yeah, so he starts the debate kind of like very smug, saying, we're just going to quibble about definitions, not a term of art, whatever. But it gets even worse because I bring up or an example to go against their example. So his whole thing is the American moral proposition, or as I understand it, is commitment to generic or some specific kind of moral realism. Some specific kind of moral realism or objective morality. And this was the thing I'm referencing with Reddit, where they're saying that I should know what objective morality is. Like, I am telling you right now, I don't understand objective morality as a concept. I understand that people claim to adhere to objective morality or claim to be realists in that sense. And frankly, I'm not even like the best to distinguish between the moral realist or the objectivist. I don't even fucking. But to the extent that someone has tried to like convey to me what is meant by a stance independent moral right or wrong, I haven't been able to grasp what that means. And it's not objective morality coming from God specifically, because that's what one of them said, the Gen Z guy. But Ryan said you wouldn't need to believe in God to get to objective morality, which is curiouser and curiouser, right? Like, so surely if there's an objective morality, there's a correct answer as to where that objective morality emanates from, to the extent that it's a coherent concept. And so how can there be mutually competing claims to objective morality, or like the source of objective morality or whatever? But maybe what is meant by the American moral proposition in their eyes is this meta-ethical view that's agnostic as to the source of where the realism comes from, like, but even take a bigger step back. Does this make any fucking sense at all? That what we mean by the American moral proposition, if you were to hear that word, it would be commitment to a particular moral realism. And so the proposition of the debate is the left is not committed to moral realism as practiced in the founding of the country, this meta-ethical position. It's just like, as a matter of like, look around you, who would understand those terms that way? And then B, like, grant it, right? I saw a comment that, like, to this effect. Okay, who cares? Even if I were to grant that, why is that a problem? Why is it a problem if the left has abandoned moral realism? I actually don't think that they were prepared to give an empirical case for it. They were saying these kind of weird stuff in the course of the conversation, where they seem to try to intuit the left's meta-ethical positions based on their like political positions, which of course is not something you can really suss out, right? Like, someone help me if I'm wrong here, but like, you can arrive at a political position or some kind of ethical political position, right? Like, through different means, right? And for example, he brings up utilitarians and like contrasts, like, see, you're a utilitarian. But of course, utilitarian, there's nothing inconsistent about being a utilitarian, I guess, and like a moral objectivist, right? So that was just like bizarre. It seemed like that he was trying to argue on a level in which at least his stated view on the American moral proposition wasn't operating on. That is, the normative ethical view as opposed to the meta-ethical view, as I understand it, as a fucking novice. And so on so many levels, this is messed up because, number one, who would understand a grandiose term like the American moral proposition to entail this specific kind of moral realism that he's talking about? Two, what's the case that the left has abandoned moral realism as a meta-ethical view? And it can't be something that's derived from their political positions. And number three, grant it, who the fuck cares? Right? If like that's what you want the debate to be about, if that's what you mean by those terms, like, why even have this debate? Are we really worried about the meta-ethical positions of the left? To the extent that the left even has like thought out views on meta-ethics? this can't be what he was talking about. What he's talking about is clearly DEI. He's trying to find a way to get to DEI from the founding fathers. And it just doesn't seem like a good fit for the reasons that we went through in the discussion. And I don't think that he would did he think that I wasn't going to bring up slavery? The second, you want to say that going against the American moral proposition, which is, and I really should have caught him on this. Now I'm starting to notice some faults in my own debate because, DEI can be arrived at in a moral realist sense. I think we were starting to approach this near the end during the questions, right? You can get to DEI through a moral realist perspective, or an objectivist, a moral objectivism, or whatever, objective morality. We were starting to get there, but it's kind of you can't know. How do you know that DEI would not be encompassed in some kind of objective morality? And so your case, if your evidence for abandoning a meta-ethical position is support for DEI, well, how would you know the moral objective meaning of equality as the framers understood it from an objectivist perspective? And it's kind of hard to see how these different frameworks, because it's about the framers, but it's also about objective morality, and it's about the framers accepting objective morality, but not necessarily the positions, but it's also about how you interpret these words. So I think it's a bunch of nonsense gibberish, but to the extent that I can grasp it, it's some connective tissue to the words of the Declaration of Independence viewed through an objective morality stance. Something like that. And he says, well, being wrong about the American moral proposition, which again, I thought was his meta-ethical view, but being wrong about an application of the American moral proposition with respect to equality isn't enough to say that you've abandoned it when it comes to slavery, but is with DEI, right? So those are that's the comparison. DEI on one hand, so presuming that the person or the group is wrong about the objective morality regarding DEI, and then he says that, oh my God, thank you so much for the tier 2. Holy crap, thank you so much. And then on the other hand, it's slavery. And so you're not willing to say Thomas Jefferson et al., that they abandoned the American moral proposition, even though they were wrong about the objective morality of slavery vis-a-vis equality. But you are willing to do so when it comes to DEI. So you need some kind of you need some way to distinguish those two cases. And I don't really understand their attempts to do it. Seemed kind of aimless and not helping. So Ryan said the directionality of it. That was one thing he said. It's directionality, or it's, discovering things that we know to be wrong now, and that once we've discovered them, we can't go back, right? But that's kind of begging the question, right? Whole question is, how do we know that DEI is going back? How would you know that? And then also dealing with the fact that you think that the framers were aware that slavery was wrong. And so on every level, these attempts to distinguish fail. On the level of well, okay, accept that, your framework, that directionality matters, and, revisiting things that have already been settled matters. How would you know which direction is correct or not under objective morality, comparing DEI to the slavery, right? The response to the slavery was well, they were building a system, they were learning, they were making mistakes along the way, but they were committed to a process, or they were committed to objective morality. Well, couldn't you say that about the DEI people? That they're also on the same grounding? Why would you give more sympathy to the DEI people, to the slave owners in that sense? That, oh yeah, the slave owners are going to make mistakes, but they didn't really know it was wrong. Excuse me, that's kind of contradicted by you arguing very vociferously that they did think it was wrong. Did anyone notice that like incongruity? Crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. And then once we poked it just a little bit, the empirical case just kind of like was totally missing. And there were some moments of like genuine vulnerability where I was like, I do not know what they're going to say. I think that like this is getting uncomfortable for me. So one of those moments was when I pushed Ryan on like, okay, so you really think, what's your argument that the left doesn't adhere to moral realism or objective morality? And he did not have an answer for that. Because it's an empirical case to make, isn't it? It's the empirical case of like what the meta-ethical predominating view of the left is. And unless you have some like the first thing, I knew he was in trouble when he was like, well, both of you are subjectivists, right? I'm like, what the fuck? So we are now the sample of the left. And also I think Nanfan wasn't, or he's like a moral objectivist or something. So he was even like wrong about half of us. And so I'm like, oh, you really have no case when it comes to the view that you said was entailed by the American moral proposition, which is moral realism. And again, putting aside like the preposterous notion that really for hundreds of years we've been dedicated to moral realism in a way that like the American people will understand that as like a guiding principle, as opposed to like the Constitution. And yeah, I would agree with this. Most people haven't really thought too deeply about their meta ethics. Yeah, totally. And like, he didn't have an answer for that. He didn't have an answer for the empirical case. So like, okay, but then he goes, "Oh, I'm not here to argue that. I'm not here to argue that that the left has abandoned objective morality." And then like, he's like, "Okay, so what are you here to argue?" Oh, natural rights, which is a type of objective morality. And I asked him to define natural rights, and he said, objective morals that are discoverable. Well, isn't that the same thing as what he's saying objective morality is? You understand that? So if he's grounding out natural rights into some kind of concept that is seemingly perfectly overlapping with his notion of objective morality, then and if he grants that he doesn't have a case empirically for why the left has abandoned objective morality, then it almost seems to follow logically that he doesn't have a case for the left abandoning natural rights. Like, I was like, holy shit. Sarah Tomato bailed him out like a couple times on those. Another one was the contradiction point on positive and negative rights, where I kept pushing them on, and because he said multiple times there's a contradiction between negative and positive rights. I'm like, what's the contradiction? And like Sarah bailed him out pretty hard there, as I remember. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? Like, damn, that was rough. I guess he thought that, and here's one of the reasons why, and I saw some comments like, why aren't you defending DEI and the merits? First of all, I think it depends on like what we're talking about, because there are some DEI policies I think are stupid and I wouldn't support. There are some that I think are more acceptable. It depends on the DEI. That's number one. But number two, who felt on defense that entire conversation? They did, of course. That I think is one of my strengths, is I get to the prompt, I get to what the debate topic is, and I'm happy to answer questions and stuff. And you'll notice, by the way, when they ask me like tough questions, I'll answer like, so is slavery consistent with your? Yes, instantly give it away. There's just this like, and I see, I'm starting to notice it more and more of like other people. There's this like inability to want to ever give ground on anything, that it's like a sign of weakness. The best example of this in the course of the conversation was when we were talking about the literal statement, we hold these truths to be self-evident. I'm like, well, literally, this isn't a moral proposition, right? It's a statement of belief, right? And he couldn't even grant that. I don't know why. So many people that I have this conversation with like are unwilling to give ground in any respect. What up, Tomato? Yeah, saying I don't know is a strength. more on that. We'll get to Epstein in a little bit of a second. Those of you who didn't watch the debate, you're probably like, what the hell's going on? Further on this, who the hell does like, did he think that he was going to walk in, have a DEI debate, talk about all the shit the left is doing? If that's what he wanted to do, he should have just phrased it like the left is doing bad things or something, or the left is ethically compromised on these issues. Right? Like, we can have the debate. Thank you so much for the bits. The fact that Ryan recognized the name Darth Dawkins when you, yeah, I know he recognized it. These guys are all pre-sub people. When we actually got into some of the more like philosophy bro type stuff, which again, I'm not an expert at it at all. I don't try to represent to be. It started getting a little embarrassing. I think I heard Ryan say, I repeated at the end of the, like, my recap there. I am pretty sure I distinctly heard Ryan say 3 is a proposition and pi is a proposition. That 3 is a fact. That the rules of logic are facts. Yeah. Like, what does that mean? At one point, we were having a discussion on the Euthyphro dilemma where I was basically just asking him, he was like, this is philosophy 101. I'm like, I don't fucking, just answer the questions, bro. Just answer the questions. Because when I was asking, like, would God lie or something, he's like, well, you know, like, why would it be wrong to lie if all emanates from God, and like if good emanates from God and, you know, God lies, doesn't that by definition make his lie good? And it was just nonsense. And then I realized, like, I was surrounded by these Darth Dawkins presuppositional people. This is like an understated, wow, oh my God, another tier 2. Thank you so much. Guys, incredible. Thank you so much. For all the Twitch subs right now, if you're a sub on Twitch, there's liberal surrender hands emote right now. Check under your chair. Kick viewers as well. YouTube, we're just waiting for, I think, one more membership, and we'll have a static version because no gifts are allowed on YouTube. It's about being in the right direction. Yeah, and I don't even like understand the distinction between like being on the wrong side of an issue and being on the wrong direction. Like, really? You don't think that maintaining slavery when you know it's wrong is the wrong direction? You understand? Like, the DEI people could make just as much of a case and say, hey, you know, like, we're working to get to the end that we all want, and we're going to make mistakes along the way. Like, there's just no reason you should treat the DEI people worse in that respect than the slave owners and the slave promoters and the slave enjoyers who knew it was wrong. It's such a preposterous thing. There was never a good answer for it. It's like, and the minute they try to, like, they're just like, let's move on. No, tell me about your, and then the lies. Holy shit, the lies. Oh my God, thank you so much, Schween. Thank you. I think that will give us what we need for our special little treat, for our special little chatters. Thank you so much, Scuzzy. Special little treat for our special little chatters over in the YouTube chat. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Shout out YouTube chat. Let me take a sip of coffee. At this point, I'm just looping, but let me just think if there's anything else I wanted to discuss. Oh, the precept people. Like, this is a phenomena that needs to just end. The people who say, like, logic is a fact, or 3 is a fact, or there was one guy that I kept pushing on him, like, why is God's nature good? He's like, well, he's the truth bringer, or the truth establisher, the foundation of truth. I'm like, well, why does that make what he does or his nature good? And he says, because of the impossibility of the contrary. And I'm just like, that's just restating the claim. Thank you so much for the bits. You know, like when you just say because of the impossibility of the contrary, that's just restating it is the way I'm saying it. Thank you so much for the sub on Twitch, guys. I really appreciate it. Do you ever ask these people about the Civil War? They don't defend the Confederacy. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know that. I really don't. Zero mention of Gen Z. I feel like Gen Z wasn't like following. Like I'm pretty sure Gen Z was understanding the conversation at the level of I said slavery and was pretending that they were in favor of it when actually that's what they tried to say of me. Like he heard slavery and assumed, I guess, that I was saying that they were in favor of slavery or that slavery was compatible with their version of the American moral proposition when I clearly said it was compatible with mine. So I didn't even like know that he followed the conversation. And certainly when he tried to get his licks in on the issue of positive negative rights, just spanked. Totally spanked. Wait, what was I gonna say? Yeah, when you just say the impossibility of the contrary, it's not an argument, it's just repeating your initial claim. And so it's not actually providing the thing. And then at one point he's like, well, what do you mean by good? I'm like, oh, I just mean like according to, some standard or to my preferences. And he's like, well, explain it. I'm like, you want me to explain my preferences? You want me to like give you some accounting for why I like the things I like? I mean, these are all processes of the brain, I'm sure, that I have no comprehension of, like why I enjoy coffee or why I like this or that or why I don't like this. Like, it's my nurture and my nature, I guess. But no, it was fun. Thank you so much for the Subarino. Let me think. Anything else before we move on to Epstein Trump stuff? I have a lot of different floating thoughts in my head. I might start monologuing. It was fun though. I would do those panels again. Word to the wise, they got to pick their propositions better. And like just price in the meaning of the term you want. Oh, this is the last thing. Ryan was like, well, if you grant my definition of the terms, is what I say true? And at that point, it's just like, okay, you really just want to have a debate where you win by definition, as in where you're just like trivially correct because you just defined your way to victory. It would be like saying, yes, has the left abandoned the American moral proposition? By the left, I mean the Democrats. And by the American moral proposition, I mean the Republican Party. Have the Democrats abandoned the Republicans? Yes. Okay. You win. Yay. But then if you take a step back and don't map on his particular views, but just see like basic equality, then I'm like, no, you don't win because like on your view, you're okay with some racial discrimination. And he's like, I don't want to talk about back in the day. Yeah, because it would shatter your point and your objective moral philosophy or whatever. Oh, that's the other thing. Like, we should have, one failing that I should have done is pushed him on some hypothetical when it came to like, would you collectivize property if it meant preventing the destruction of the entire country in every other respect? Okay, you wouldn't. What if it meant infinite? So like push him until he finally concedes that there's a threshold, and which point is like, okay, is that threshold divinely ordained or did you just make it up? It just felt like they just wanted to like say everything that they agreed with is a result of the foundation of the country. It's because they are ordained by God, and everything you think is like shit because it's subjective and it's not tailored to God. But even he admitted like it's really, really hard to know what objective morality is. Like, then fuckhead, how do you know DEI is not objective morality? How are you in a good position to know that DEI is outside of the realm of objective morality? motherfucker. It's written on our hearts. Not on my heart. Also, God's a pretty shitty writer if he, didn't write no slavery on the hearts of all of the all the framers. God revealed it to you such that you know it to be true. Oh, but can God lie? Oh, and then we're back to that, right? Jesus Christ. Okay, that's the debate. We're moving on to the what I'm going to deem my Epstein monologue about recent events and stuff. It's worth taking a step back and doing a little bit of a summary about how we got here. Recall that Jeffrey Epstein is a notorious criminal and the subject of wide amounts of scrutiny across the lands and conspiracy theories. When I say conspiracy theories, I don't necessarily mean that like it's kooky or whatever. I just mean they're theories about conspiracies. In the case of Epstein, it's the allegation, which seems quite corroborated, that he engaged in criminal sexual behavior, sometimes with people under the age of majority, and that he assisted in trafficking, along with Ghislaine Maxwell, certain women, some over the age of majority. Some of the victims were not underage at the time, but run the gamut. Needless to say, Epstein had many connections to powerful people: Bill Clinton, Ehud Barak, all these different names, and so that gave it a bit of intrigue. Initially, Epstein was charged in state court in Florida. He made a deal with federal prosecutors as well, who were considering charges, and in exchange for pleading guilty for the state offenses, he was given a non-prosecution agreement from the federal government. Some question about what that non-prosecution agreement covered, whether it covered the pending action in the Southern District when he was recharged sometime in 2018, 2019, and whether it covered Maxwell, there's a co-conspirators clause in the non-prosecution agreement that would seemingly on the face of it cover even unnamed co-conspirators. Pretty rare clause to have in there, not to spell it out. Some of the logic, so we're told by the people who devised that particular non-prosecution agreement, is that technically there are ways in which victims themselves can be co-conspirators in the crime of transporting themselves / doing these acts. And so that's like at least the official narrative as to why this like broad co-conspirators clause was included. But in any event, didn't really help Maxwell that much. He lost on appeal on there. That's, and Epstein died, lost his life in circumstances that struck many as odd, in the sense of convenient, perhaps. Not trying to imply or rain on anyone's particular parade on what occurred. He died while under the custody of the Bureau of Prisons, which is officially under the control of then Attorney General Bill Barr. Remember also that it was Donald Trump who was president at the time of the death of Jeffrey Epstein. Trump has a history with Epstein. Trump partied with Epstein. Trump was close with Epstein. And so there was some scrutiny into certain Democrats, for sure, other connected people, but Trump as well. Trump actually nominated as his Secretary of Labor the federal prosecutor who oversaw the deal with Epstein in Florida, a guy by the name of Acosta. And kind of a string of odd statements, sometimes like apologetic, sometimes like pseudo-sympathetic from Trump. But this became a huge rallying cry for a lot of the, some might say, credulous minds of the MAGA base, who are already primed for conspiracy in the first instance. They were primed with QAnon and a lot of the other downstream effects of who started to run the Republican Party, which tended to be more unhinged figures. And they believe in critical pedo theory, whereby very powerful pedos run like the world. And Epstein was the centerpiece of a lot of these people's conspiracies and thoughts. Some of them involving the, active participation, perhaps, of intelligence agencies, is what's alleged. Or other powerful people, or the Democrats, or whatever. And so, the MAGA base made this a very important cause for them, especially in the aftermath of COVID, when no one had anything to do but be on the internet. They made it an important cause of theirs, so much so that practically every important surrogate of Trump in the lead up to the 2024 election victory was talking about this shit. Donald Trump Jr., J.D. Vance, Dan Bongino, who's now Deputy FBI Director, Kash Patel himself, who was also FBI Director. Tons of statements. Trump himself made statements, sometimes equivocal in nature. He was like, I don't know if I'm going to do it right. He did say that he did promise. His campaign 100% promised. Don't let anyone tell you they didn't promise. They definitely promised. But as we've talked a little bit before, it's one thing to throw stones as an outsider. Very different thing when you're actually in charge of what the hell is going on. And early on, this seemed like a sensitive subject for the administration. They made some overtures, like they cared about it. They had it be part of some Republicans' portfolio or whatever. But there wasn't a ton of movement on it until this big media event at the White House. They kind of sprang it on some people, according to reporting, if you believe these people. But Pam Bondi, who in a weird way, I hate Pam Bondi, everyone knows that. I kind of feel a little bad that one of her statements was taken, I think, a little bit out of context, is when she said, the files are sitting on my desk, or the list is on my desk. It's on my desk. Basically in response to someone asking, do you have the list or whatever? Are you going to release the list? And she said, it's on my desk right now. And it's clear she hadn't read it yet. And it's clear she wasn't talking about she couldn't have been able to characterize what was on there because she just hadn't gotten to it yet. But it was obviously the plain text of that statement from Pam Bondi in response to, I think it was a question from Fox News. It sounded like there was a list, right? It presupposed a list. And that's also what you have to have in mind is the notion of the Epstein files. I've talked about this a little bit before, kind of presupposes incriminating stuff. That the definition of Epstein files, as far as the MAGA base is concerned, are incriminating documents related to Jeffrey Epstein and other powerful people. That if they don't uncover greater malfeasance than what is already publicly known, then in some sense they're not really the Epstein files. There's still things that are being hidden from view. And I've always taken this kind of neutral approach. I'm I haven't seen a smoking gun to show that it extends much farther beyond Epstein and maybe a couple other individuals, the nature of these crimes. I haven't seen it, right? But more and more, the Trump administration is starting to look as guilty as sin by their absolutely preposterous responses that not even the MAGA base can stomach. Now, I'm not saying they're all turning on Trump. That's not what I'm saying. But they just don't believe him on the Epstein stuff. The polls bear that out. It's his worst issue. And whenever you're debating a conservative, you should, if you're like publicly doing so, you should bring up Epstein. And why is that? So I mentioned this media event where Pam Bondi, after making some intimations as though like there was going to be a list that's revealed, that there existed a list, she called in a bunch of these doofuses like fucking DC Drano, who is there? These other assholes, Jack Posobiec, who blocked me, motherfucker. DC Drano hasn't blocked me yet though. Scott Pressler, do you guys know Scott Pressler? Libs of TikTok, true journalists, patriots to America, and gave him these little binders, these cute little binders, which they all triumphantly waved around in this photo op that will go down in history as like one of the most ill-advised. Probably like all of the influencers who are involved in that apologized, because it later turned out that like none of these files that were included there were a revelation in any respect. In fact, some of them were more redacted versions of what had already been released publicly. And so this infuriated the MAGA base. Now, again, I want to stress, not to the extent of like abandoning him per se. Not saying that. But first thing I want to do is skip forward in time a little bit to what news just came out. So just bear with me. We're about to go back, but
Attorney General Pam Bondi has chosen a prosecutor to investigate people and companies associated with Jeffrey Epstein, quickly obeying a public request from President Donald Trump. Bondi writes this, quote, "Thank you, Mr. President. SDNY U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton is one of the most capable and trusted prosecutors in the country, and I have asked him to take the lead," end quote. That in direct response.
Okay, so first off, oh my God, Donald Trump is directing his DOJ to do all these. Yes, of course, we know that. Like, Trump is ordering the Department of Justice, like, directly to go after Comey, to go after all these people. So it's like, it's not surprising in the slightest that Trump is ordering the DOJ around. Okay, so that's like, that ship sailed on election night. We knew he was going to do that. He was already trying to push that way when it came to Bill Barr back in the day. But that ship has sailed. He is directing the DOJ as he sees fit. That's also one of the reasons why he can't extricate himself from responsibility, because he really is, on top of these matters, or at least, is able to direct his control whenever he wants. Now, this is an odd announcement because, as I'm sure many of you are aware, there were a bunch of, I think, 20,000 plus emails that were dropped from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, who handed over, I think in response to a subpoena by the Oversight Committee or something like that in the House of Representatives. There was a big drop of emails, and the fervor has started up again. And it turns out Trump is on a bunch of these emails. Not all of them, sorry. A bunch of these emails. Now, they run the gamut from Epstein talking like some shit to like maybe like, holy shit, like this is some, he knew about everything. He had his fucking nose up to a glass, whatever, window or a glass door or something, looking at the girls or something. Something like that, right? Now, who knows if they're true? I don't know. All that is to say, though, it's shady as hell. And it confirms a bunch of things. But the most important thing it confirms is the administration has been lying the entire time. Lying about practically everything. But we'll get to that. First, let's talk about the smoke. Smoke number one is Trump acting weird. All right, that's smoke number one. Smoke number two is they sent Todd Blanche, Deputy AG, to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell, and they recorded the interview. Odd for the Deputy AG, former personal attorney of Donald Trump, to take on this responsibility. But after that, there has been like consistent reporting that Ghislaine Maxwell has been sent to camp and sent to like a nicer spot that Trump is floating a pardon. There's even been insider reports that like the guards are having to attend to her every whim. So that's fucking weird. But let's talk about the lies. Provable lies, right? Like, this is not even contested. And this, by the way, this is disqualifying. Half the shit Trump does is disqualifying, maybe 80%. But he is complicit in a bunch of lies regarding a known predator / sex offender who is known the world over. What am I talking about? First, let's talk about Trump's lies. Trump says it's a hoax. Nothing to see here. That it was actually a story created by the Democrats with no proof. That the entire Epstein saga was made up by the Democrats, by Obama. That is so ridiculous. No one believed that. Not even the most diehard influencer was going to bat on that one. No one. Because what does that contradict? It contradicts a core tenet of the dogma of the MAGA cult, which sees Trump as a figure to rid the world of. Thank you so much, Hutch. Hutch, my boy. Hutch is my boy, my privileged little boy. I'm just kidding. Hey, be nice. Thank you so much, Hutch. I really appreciate the big raid. This is a huge raid. Perhaps the biggest raid of my entire career. We're just talking Epstein real quick, talking shop. You know what it is. Guys, if you're a sub to the channel on Twitch, you can use a liberal surrender hands. When you need a surrender, just know you got the emote for it. Check under your desk. And don't go to school tomorrow. Hey, appreciate you, Hutch. We'll be on Live and Learn on Monday. Thank you so much for the follow, guys. Okay. Yes, the New York financier. Correct. Where was I? What did I just say? Yes. Trump was lying about who invented it. And it doesn't make any good sense to the MAGA cultists who views Trump as a messiah figure standing in opposition to the critical pedo theorists. That's what they see Trump as. Not just as himself, the cult-like leader. He is the cult leader, but he's a cult-like leader with a mythology around him. And part of that mythology is him as savior. And so there needs to be something for him to save, right? Like there needs to be something to fight against and to save. And so saying that it's all a hoax, cooked up by Obama, and it's not going to play. It's not going to play because they've heard it all before, and it undermines the notion that there's actually a there. If it's all fake, then all of their conspiracies are fake. So that was a clear and obvious lie. No evidence was ever produced to substantiate that. That Barack Obama and his cronies in 2016 cooked up the Epstein files. It's ridiculous. But the DOJ's also played a prominent role in lying. They said in this memo, unsigned memo, I think with the DOJ and FBI, over a weekend, it was on a Sunday or something, that there's no other evidence of anything. Thank you so much for the super chat. Miss you too, babe. That there's no other investigation, that everything's over. The case is closed. That's what the DOJ said. We've done everything we can, says DOJ. We've released everything we can, says Trump. It's all over. Epstein stuff is over. Well, if it's all over, Mr. Trump, why are you opening up a new probe? So this is confirmation of a lie. Because if they were confident that there was no need for a probe when they sent out that unsigned memo back in months ago now, are they lying now or are they lying then? And if there's a new basis to do investigations now that didn't exist then, is it because you didn't subpoena the fucking estate? Give me a break. The Trump administration also went to court in an obviously doomed attempt to bypass the rules of federal criminal procedure and to unseal grand jury testimony without one of the exceptions provided under the rules to unseal it. Some of the MAGA commentators started doing their anti-Semitic memes when one of the judges, who was Jewish, literally bound by like 11th Circuit precedent not to release those files. It was a way to have a scapegoat in the moment and have it be the courts and not Trump himself, constantly trying to pass the buck. That was sketchy as hell. But of course, you don't need to release the grand jury materials. They're just one iota, one small percentage of what exists in, I'm sure, dozens of hard drives and evidence vaults within the DOJ. Trump is well within his authority to release this information whenever he wants. So is Kash Patel and Pam Bondi. These are individuals who were specifically entrusted by Trump to do this specific thing. So I don't say that there's a smoking gun proof that Trump did something illegal, criminal, or whatever. But that's some context, right? So the DOJ is being shifty. They're saying that there's no investigation needed anymore, that it's all over. They're doing token moves that obviously aren't going to assuage anybody and that were like essentially designed to fail and that are, you know, not at all necessary given the authorities of the DOJ and the president. That's sketchy as fuck. Trump is lying about who cooked up the Epstein documents. This weird birthday card is released in the Wall Street Journal, for which Trump sues. I think they might have dropped the case. I'm not sure. Actually, I should check the status of it. Where Trump is shown writing to Epstein with like a figure of a woman with small breasts that says, "May every day be another wonderful little secret. Enigmas never age." Just weird fucking shit. Again, just painting the picture a little bit of everything. And then Thomas Massie and some Republicans, along with Democrats like Ro Khanna, etc., they try to force the issue. They try to force the issue because the Speaker of the House, on Trump's like direct orders, is closing down Congress like early, closing the House of Representatives because of this issue, and won't put it up to a vote. And so they have to do this like discharge petition thing where they can force a vote, but they need some Republicans to sign on. They start getting Republicans to sign on, and Mike Johnson like does not budge. A Democratic rep dies, I think, in office, and his daughter or relative is a successor. This is Representative Grijalva. And we have the longest non-seating of a member after they won their election in the history of the country. She was the vote, the deciding vote that just passed to get the discharge petition. And now, the release of the estate emails shows that Trump is all over the shit. So, what do we do with that information? At a bare minimum, we know for certain the Trump administration is lying about the Epstein files. That is confirmed. That is confirmed because Trump's lying about them, about their origin. Trump's lying about whether, and so is the DOJ, whether there needs to be additional information or investigations. On the one hand, they said there doesn't need to be. It's a hoax, etc. Now it's not a hoax. Now we need to assign a new person to investigate, but only the Dems. Only the Dems. After we got reports that Trump specifically was asking the DOJ to parse out all the references to him in the Epstein files in the DOJ. And these new emails are like a cornucopia of like shady shit, weird shit. I'm not going to say smoking gun stuff, but weird as fuck shit, stuff that implies that he knew way more than he's letting on. What's the explanation? Seriously. You can't pass the buck at Pam Bondi. That's the inclination that everyone wants to do. Everyone wants to blame Bondi because she's a woman, because she lied about the list is on my desk. I've already explained I'm a little sympathetic to her on that, but fuck her. She deserves all this. Bongino and Patel say, I know when it's a suicide. He killed himself. That pissed off the Trump base. And so, no, I can't prove that he did a crime or did something deplorable with respect to the Epstein stuff specifically. But we do know that they're lying. And now they're doing political investigations. They're investigating everyone who's like loosely affiliated with the Democrats, like Larry Summers, Clinton, and a few others. So, yeah. What's my conclusion? I think that the announcement of these investigations is meant to solve both a political and potentially a legal problem. The political thing is the base wants movement here, and Trump is hemorrhaging support right now. Like, hemorrhaging. At the same time, there's a battle for the soul of the Republican Party, since apparently they woke up and they were surrounded by groypers. I've been kind of warning about this for a while. I've always thought that Nick Fuentes has more influence than people gave him credit for. But that's, a bad development, to say the least. But at this time, the groypers are going after Trump, or at least some of them are, as essentially being complicit and being a pawn to Israel, who they see as sufficiently involved, if not the benefactor to Epstein's actions. And they kind of see him as a shadow broker or some kind of, blackmail guy. So this is meant to show, I think, some action there. It's funny and quaint looking back at the debate. I posted an old debate on my channel with Rob about Burisma. And Rob there has the standard, like, if there's any allegation of potential conflict of interest, there should be an immediate investigation. Of course, none of that applies to Trump with respect to the Epstein stuff, right? Everyone who's in these high positions of leadership in the DOJ, they're only there because they have to be loyal to Trump. We are living in one of the most corrupt governments of all time. That's the kind of PR stuff and the corruption on the side of going after political enemies. And it's not just the people directly related to the Epstein stuff. They're also, I think, going to go after Eric Swalwell, outspoken representative, Democratic representative. And I expect more movement on the other stuff too. Like, he's trying to distract. I don't think it's going to particularly work, but we'll see. But there's another side of thing to it too. I don't know if this is the case, but I think it might be. There's rumors that there's going to be significantly more Republicans who sign on to the resolution demanding the release of the Epstein files than who signed on to the discharge petition, like significantly more. And there's a world, I don't think it's the most likely world, but I think there's a world in which it would pass both Houses of Congress with 2/3 majorities, veto-proof majorities. And I think these investigations are meant to stifle disclosure. We can't comment on ongoing investigations. We can't release information while there's ongoing investigations and run the clock out. And part of that, I think, and that leads me to asshole of the day, the person I really want to blame right now, Chief Justice Roberts. Is he here? Where you at, Chief? Anyone see the Chief? Where you at? I mean that metaphorically. It's a bit, I everything. We all support the Supreme Court as an institution, I guess. All right. Think about it this way. What was the rationale in Trump versus United States as to why you couldn't indict Trump as relates his communications with the DOJ about investigations? Well, the rationale is, well, those were in the core and exclusive powers of the President of the United States. That investigations, prosecutions, those kinds of decisions are within the core and exclusive authorities of the President of the United States. Remember, first question, is it an official power? Great deference on that. Official is a wide net. If unofficial, no immunity, right? Official, immunity, some immunity, at least some immunity. And in the official, there's core and non-core. Core are those in the preclusive and conclusive authorities of the president. Those powers that are like specifically only and only his. I'm using the terminology and concepts of the opinion, this disastrous opinion in Trump of the United States. And non-core is maybe there's some overlap with other branches, and we'll have to do kind of an individual, maybe we'll have to do an individualized test on those areas, but at least presumptive, but maybe absolute. Anyway, why do I bring up the immunity decision? Because if Congress cannot criminalize the illegal conduct of the president with respect to his instructions to the DOJ regarding investigations. Because remember, immunity doesn't mean protection from things that are legal, right? The whole point of immunity is to protect things that are potentially illegal, right? If immunity only protected legal things, what's the use of it? Legal actions are already protected by the fact that they're legal. Maybe there's some added procedural things you can do with a immunity doctrine as regards legal things, but it's meant to apply to both legal and illegal conduct. So you would think it doesn't necessarily define the scope of what is legal or illegal, this immunity doctrine. But peel the layer back a little bit further, this onion. The whole problem with the Trump case, as the majority saw it in Trump v. United States, is a separation of powers concern. Thank you so much for the membership. By separation of powers, I mean separation of the federal government's powers. Congress cannot touch a conclusive and preclusive authority of the President of the United States. Congress can't touch it. It's not just a matter of specific criminal immunity. It's broader than that. That's why Trump v. United States is worse in the results. I would rather Trump have been pardoned than we have this case. Because the rationale, the logic of Trump v. United States is broader than the case before it. It's a unitary executive case that says it's fundamentally illegitimate for Congress to intrude as a body, right? Congress is a body, into the president's conclusive and preclusive authorities. Now, note the incoherence of that, because it needs to make contact with the fact that Congress has the impeachment power. So if Congress has the impeachment power where they're going to oversee what the president does in his official capacity, that's what impeachment's for, why can Congress intrude on the president's conclusive and preclusive authorities when it comes to impeachment but not legislation? That's, I think, a problem that was never answered by the Roberts Court. Why legislation is different. Yes, Congress, of course, can impeach over official acts and over core duties, don't you know? But Congress can't legislate as to core duties or core powers. Which brings me to my point. I think that there is a non-trivial argument if you take the logic of Trump versus the United States seriously, that in the midst of an ongoing investigation, an investigation ordered directly by the President of the United States, that Congress issuing commands for production of documents in the midst of that exercise of authority by the president, right? Because the president ordered these investigations, and he's essentially overseeing the investigation. That would intrude on the conclusive and preclusive authorities of the president vis-a-vis ordering investigations. You're undermining an investigation. You're trying to dictate how investigations are run by preempting evidence in front of the public while the president is trying to enforce the law. I think that Trump has a non-trivial argument as to whether a law, duly passed law with both houses of Congress, 2/3 majority, using the logic of Trump versus the United States, that law as applied to him in that context is unconstitutional. Try to write around it. Try to find a way to write around. I mean, what's the argument that it wouldn't be precluded? It's going to have to be some bullshit, garbage, scared opinion, cowardly opinion that doesn't want to, underscore the scope of what Trump versus the United States was about, which was much broader than criminal immunity. It was an entire theory, outlook of the president as a kind of pseudo-monarch. Now, I would be arguing very strenuously, if this ever goes to court, that we should limit the scope of Trump versus the United States. You might raise arguments and say, listen, Trump versus the United States is just about the president and, unduly chilling the president's conduct. This is directed at the DOJ. We're not talking about chilling the president's conduct. The president can continue to run his investigation, and this doesn't unduly chill it at all. We're not talking about, it's not directly controlled by Trump in the United States because, of course, it doesn't relate to indicting anybody. It's just about document production. And, of course, Congress can create the DOJ. They can also destroy it. So shouldn't that include some kind of transparency laws? You're saying those are all unconstitutional? And so I'm certain that I would, marshal arguments, and I don't think that they'd be like horrible arguments, but I do think that at a certain point we have to recognize that SCOTUS screwed the pooch when they made this political decision in Trump versus the United States. They weren't thinking. I see so many apologists for these justices who sign on to that opinion, and it drives me crazy. The opinion is dog shit. It doesn't make any sense. And the logical, or at least plausible, readings of that opinion lead one to determine that the president really is untrammeled when it comes to the use of the prosecutorial authority, and frankly, anything else that he can plausibly call within his core and exclusive authorities. Say, for instance, murdering a bunch of people on the high seas. What are the odds we're going to get justice for that? Murder. What's a better word for it? And people were laughing, right? So I was running these hypotheticals about using military force on enemies abroad. I was running this Mitt Romney hypothetical where he's visiting something and they kill him. But you understand that Trump is doing that, right? He is using his core powers with respect to the military to just murder people. Now, he says they're all guilty of this or that. He says they're not American. But that's not the question. The question is, if he knew it to be sham, if he knew it to be, for example, like a sham investigation into Epstein, where he already said, there's nothing to see here, it's a hoax, would that change the calculation as to whether or not he's immune? And the answer is no. It shouldn't if you read Trump versus the United States the way it was written, which said, I don't care, so says Roberts, if this is sham. I don't care if this was intentionally done maliciously, that we have to be like a horse with blinders. You look at the powers, you look at the assertion of power, and you note whether or not that power, without looking at the purpose for which it's invoked, whether that power amounts to a core and exclusive power, or indeed an official power, or something like that. That you don't look at the intention behind the use of an authority to determine the scope of that authority. And I think that that is hogwash. So stupid. And it leads us here, where we have a plausible argument for Trump that, why should I listen to Congress when they want transparency? And what's the limiting principle here? He can fire whoever he wants for any reason. Congress can't meaningfully check him except arbitrarily, just with impeachment. That's the only way that Congress can check the executive branch. Last I heard, that's not what I learned in civics class. That's not what I learned in law school. But it's increasingly becoming the stance of the Supreme Court of the United States. Anyway, I think Trump is trying to evade further disclosures. I don't know that that makes it so that we ought to think he did something illegal or whatever, but he's acting like he did something fucking shady. And this announcement investigation is just a further continuation of the political nature of the DOJ, that it's been converted to be essentially a band of marauders, brigands, mercenaries at the beck and call of the president, of the occupant. And as a way to prevent further disclosure of the Epstein files. Any questions? When you put it in perspective, the letter, the emails, Ghislaine Maxwell, sending Todd Blanche to do the interview in Ghislaine Maxwell, her getting all these perks, his weird statements on the matter, lying about it, calling it a hoax, saying no more investigations, case closed. Okay, no, we're opening the investigation. Something ain't right. Something smells wrong. And if there is no there, why not release the files? Why not? Why is he, and I didn't tell this to you, you probably already know, why is he calling Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room to berate her with the Attorney General, I think Deputy AG and FBI Director, all in the same room, to berate her on a vote? Do you understand how fucking unhinged that is? The top law enforcement agent in the United States, the Attorney General, her immediate deputies, head of the FBI, their whole goal is to essentially whip votes for Trump on the Epstein files. Remarkable. They haul Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room to do this. And MAGA is coping the likes to which I've never seen before. Can you imagine if this amount of smoke, if this amount of shady conduct, of inappropriate, corrupt conduct occurred with a Democrat with respect to the Epstein file? It is so beyond the pale, so unhinged, that you just have to laugh. You really do have to laugh. Trump is a piece of shit. He's a decrepit old man, and he is perverting our country. And these loser fucks are trying to run interference on the Epstein files. And so I can't wait. That'll be a whip count that I'm eager to see when the discharge petition comes to the floor of the House. I don't think you can, at this point, I think it's a done deal. I don't think that you can withdraw a vote at this point. So that thing seemingly is going to happen unless Mike Johnson tries to not put it up for a vote, although he said he was gonna. But that's a vote I'm going to be interested in watching. And until that time, I just can't stop looking at all the cope from MAGA. Oh, he's being advised poorly. He's got people around him. Yeah, he's got the wrong people. Dude, it never ends. The constant excuses. How do these guys still cradle the balls of this piece of shit? Oh, yeah, he's being advised wrong. We just need to fire Pam Bondi. That's the problem. Pam Bondi is at the disposal of Trump on everything. Pam Bondi only does what she does because Trump asked it. If Trump wanted to release the files, they would have been released yesterday. It is so pathetic and fucking sad to watch grown men, grown women cope this amount. Oh, we actually don't care because Epstein, it's not like he was going after 8-year-olds. Did you see that, Megyn Kelly? Meanwhile, Trump is like going on his Great Gatsby tour, doing these Roaring 20s parties, talking about my ballroom. Oh, my ballroom. My amazing ballroom. Taking bribes, guitar playing. By far the most corrupt, disgusting, deplorable administration we've ever seen in terms of corruption. Crazy shit. We're talking crazy stuff. Ba-da-da-da. Okay. Any questions before? Oh, wait. There was like a funny little one of my favorite new copers. Why? This is the guy from Rasmussen. So this guy like is funny to watch sometimes because he's a big coper. He's like, the reason why the youth are leaving MAGA is because they're not going harder on Arctic haze and going out and doing these investigations in Clapper and like Comey and stuff. That's why they're losing the youth vote. This is the number one pollster for Republicans, is Rasmussen. The guy's totally unhinged. Maybe it's the cost of living. Maybe it's the fact that Trump's like, we solved the cost of living. You guys are just like losers who don't believe it. But anyway, this was funny. Your moment of zen.
Why does he not know that his base puked about this? And why did his base puke? Are they xenophobic? Well, no, 60% of Republicans outright say that China is an enemy. Only 7% say an ally. That's the polling. You're the one, Trump, who coined the term China. You turned America against China. Literally, Trump's.
He coined the term China. He invented it. Invented this word. I'm gonna listen to it one more time. You coined it. These guys are crazy.
Why does he not know that his base puked about this? And why did his base puke? Are they xenophobic? Well, no, 60% of Republicans outright say that China is an enemy. Only 7% say an ally. That's the polling. You're the one, Trump, who coined the term China. You turned America against China. Literally, Trump's movement took China, in the eyes of Republicans, from basically somewhere in between ally and enemy to enemy. Trump made China an enemy. And now he's saying, and get this, he's saying we need these students or our colleges would collapse and we wouldn't want that. That's because he's talking freaking Larry Summers. He's talking to all these billionaires who are on the boards of these colleges, and that's what they want. It's the oligarchy again. The billionaires want these.
And it's the worst kind of cope. It's like, it's not him. It's not the actual billionaires. It's not the actual billionaire president we have. Give me 1 second, folks. Anyway, yeah, those are just some musings I had on the Epstein stuff. I think it's pretty pathetic. But folks, any questions for me? Any thoughts? Any musings? Doesn't Larry Summers despise Trump? I think he He served under both Trump and Obama, I think. He was president of Harvard. He was Treasury Secretary, I think. But any questions? The coat from Debate Board, yeah, it fuels me. Truly does. Truly does. Okay, guys. I read the Lorne Southern book. I'm going to review it. I'm going to... I think it's a nice little insight into some shit. I'm going to raid you guys into IRI. I got to go. But I love you all very much. Probably will stream tomorrow. If not, tomorrow, Sunday. And, stay cool. Like my videos. It's very funny when you do that, and sub to the channel. Stay cool. I'll take a look at the California stuff.